Okay, dear organizer, the conference committee, and all the attendee. Hello, everyone. My name is Yufan Zheng, and I'm the master candidate in Liaoning University of Traditional Chinese Medicine. My supervisor is Dr. Bao Zhaoju, who is one of the most famous experts in Huangdi Neijing TCM. And today, I want to talk about emotions and mental health. I'll use comparative examination to talk about traditional Chinese medical theories of mind and Robert PLUTCHIK'S the emotion will. So when people first talk about emotions, they'll be curious and want to ask the question, like, how many emotions are there? Well, the answer of the question is based on whom you want to ask. So Aristotle first identified 14 kinds of emotions, and Darwin thought there were 7. And in 1965, American psychologist Paul Ekman developed a list of 7 basic universal emotions that they say are communicated by facial expressions, often called universal emotions. They are fear, contempt, sadness, happiness, surprise, anger, and disgust. He created a facial action coding system, and his findings about coding the fact now become more important for clinical studies and criminal analysis. So now we can move on to the first theory of today. So Dr. Robert PLUTCHIK, as the developer of one of the most influential classification approaches for general emotional responses, he created the emotional wheel listing 8 basic emotions. So what Robert PLUTCHIK worked on was pairs. We can think of these emotions as 4 pairs of opposites. Joy is opposite of emotion of sadness, and emotion of trust is opposite emotion of disgust. And fear and anger, surprise and anticipation. He also classified them as positive: joy, trust, anticipation, and surprise, or negative: anger, fear, disgust, and sadness. So according to Dr. PLUTCHIK, we cannot experience opposite emotions at the same time, such as the positive emotion of anticipation and the negative emotion of surprise. He suggested that we can experience blends of emotions. Look at emotion wheel, joy and trust are right next to each other. If you combine these two, you have the complex emotion of love. And in the same way, combining trust and fear produces summation, fear, surprise, resulting in awe. Surprise and sadness produces disappointment. And in the same way, got remorse, contempt, aggressiveness, optimism. And again, Dr. PLUTCHIK believes that contradictory blended emotions such as love and remorse cannot exist at the same time. For a blended emotion, there are more on the list. So Dr. PLUTCHIK also proposed that emotions vary in their intensity. We can think of the emotion wheel just as the bottom layer in a solid. So the emotions at the top of the solid are more intense, while those at the bottom of the solid are less intense. I think we can probably see it easier if we spread out the solid. So 8 basic emotions on the second ring on this wheel. So we can see that every petal of this flower-shaped graph, each petal has a range of emotions. So for every 8, that's the basic. And anger, when more extreme, is rage. Well, when less intense, is merely annoyance. So more than joy is ecstasy. And serenity is a more muted emotion. This degree of change in intensity from very strong to not so much and produces the diverse amount of emotion that we can feel. And such as trust goes from acceptance to admiration. And we got the same way that fear goes from apprehension to terror, and surprise goes from distraction to amazement, and sadness goes from passiveness to grief. And got loathing, rage, vigilance, and ecstasy. So Dr. PLUTCHIK's wheel of emotion is like a graph that uses the colorful wheel to illustrate variations in human affect and the relationship among emotions. I use this emotion wheel, hope we can understand and detect our emotions better. Now we can move on to today's second theory. So what does it look like in TCM? So in TCM, we have this emotion theory called a 7 emotion TCM. And this emotion in TCM, there are 7 emotions joy, rage, worry, passiveness, grief, terror, and fright. And this was first mentioned in Yellow Emperor's classic of internal medicine. In Chinese, we call it 黄帝内经. And in 黄帝内经, there are two books. One is called the book of plain question. In Chinese, we call it 素问. Another one is the spiritual pivot. We call it in Chinese 考灵书. So in TCM, we think there are 7 kinds of emotions, and TCM psychology originated from the 黄帝内经in the 3rd century BCE. And this emotion theory was over 2,000 years ago. And the 7 emotions refer to the human mental activities. In TCM, the 7 emotions directly affect to corresponding organs to bring on diseases. There are plenty of emotion theories in TCM, yin yang, 5 element, and qi, blood essence. In this picture, we can think that the 5 element theory divides matter into 1 of 5 categories represented by wood. Let me move a little bit here. So wood, fire, earth, mantle, and water. So wood grows and flourishes freely like a tree, and fire warms in an upward flaring pattern that can influence function of organs. And metal descends and clarifies, producing action relating to function of lungs in TCM. And water, this is soil and mantle. And for water, moistens, cools, and flows downward, relating to the function of kidneys. So the 5 elements correspond to different aspects of the body, and they work in concert and have their own internal orders and patterns of interaction. And a dynamic interaction among organs according to 5 element theory are propelled by qi, and qi is another TCM theory. Qi is the energy of human metabolism. So just as the combination of more than one type of material is required to build or achieve, or can also perceive closer relationships between certain elements more than others. For example, in this graph, we can see that water supports the growth of wood but quenches fire. And the relationship between any 2 of elements can be of either generation or suppression with a particular element, and each element is under the influence of the other 4 in some way, such as generation and suppression. And in this way, all 5 elements establish a certain pattern for the maintenance of a stable body environment. And this generation, like grow, without it, there will be no growth or development. And without suppression, there will be no balance of coordination during development and change. I think we can take a look at this next, the 5 element chart. So this chart is used to explain the function of various organs and their internal relationships. The 5 elements have distinct characteristics. So the organ functions can be characterized by their respective 5 elements. And we can see that at the last section of this chart is one called emotion. There are 5 emotions like anger, joy, worry, sorrow, and fear. So we call it 5 wheels in TCM. And how to become, actually 5 wheels is more like a deeper tensions of the vitality in each of the 5 sound organs. But how to become the 7 emotions? In TCM, let's see that. The worry divides into worry and passiveness, and fear divides into fear and fright. And that is the 7 emotions. What's the difference between them? Actually, the 7 emotions is more like a disorder of the regular movement of qi, which produces life. What does the 7 emotion TCM look like? You can take a look at this. So each of the 5 organs is related to an emotion that is fundamentally the expression of the movement of qi. According to 黄帝内经, the heart is our emotional, mental, and spiritual life with the ability to think, analyze, and experience life. Like there's one thing in 黄帝内经, heart, health, and mind. And when an organ loses its rooting in the spirits, its qi no longer flows and cannot correctly flows and it disrupts the psychological and physiological functioning. So in Su Wen, the book of plain questions in chapter 38 had this discriminations about this saying, anger must rise, joy slows it down. So there's also a saying in the book of plain questions, Su Wen chapter 5, anger as the liver emotion, and worry, sadness as emotion of lung, and joy as heart emotion, passiveness as spleen emotion, and fear as the emotion of kidney. So today we talk about the two different theories. We can see that they have the common elements of the emotion, which are joy, anger, sadness, fear, fright, or surprise. So in TCM, we will add two more, worry, passiveness, and according to Dr. PLUTCHIK, we have trust, disgust, and anticipation. In TCM, we use this 5-element theory all the time. Yeah, the 5-element theory can help to depict the interrelationships among the function of organs. And it's a very important reasoning process also in clinical application. And that plays an essential role in diagnosis and treatment for diseases. For COVID-19, data shows that TCM is 93% effective in disease prevention, early stage treatment. So the 5 elements correspond to different aspects of the natural world and the body. And different aspects work closely together and have their own internal orders and patterns. And each of the 5 organs is related to an emotion and is affected by its emotion. But one emotion may injure several organs by bringing disorder in their own movement of qi. So one organ may be injured by different emotions. And TCM psychology considers relationship between man to man, man to society, and man to nature. Use this holistic view all the time. So for the emotional will theory, we can think that it has the 8 basic emotions. We're talking in pairs. You can experience blended emotions. We're talking in positive and negative negative, they can block each other, and emotions can vary in intensity. But what is emotion actually, and how to interpret emotions through different theories? Emotions are particular types of energy, and this energy behind emotion is going to cause us to move in a particular way and take certain kinds of actions. In fact, every single human being, I think, is going to experience an emotion at all times. And the only thing that we may not know what emotion we are in at that time, because we may not know the vocabulary around that emotion. We may not know those distinctions that we can make, or we just may not be aware of it because it doesn't factor into our area of importance at that moment. But we are in an emotion at all times. But what we choose to do with that energy of emotions, I think, can create the sort of possibilities for the action that we can undertake. I really hope that I made clear enough for today's presentation. And I hope it can be helpful for you. And I think with the development of everything, people are under a lot of pressure, and this emotion theory has been really a hot topic these years, and people have gained a lot of emotional burden. That's why I chose the 7 emotions as my thesis topic for my master program. So if you've got any interest about TCM and 7 emotions, you can always contact me at any time. Thank you for being here today. I really hope that I made it clear enough, and I really appreciate that you be here and listen to my presentation. Thank you.